My name is Emma. I'm 29 years old, and until recently, I worked as a senior financial analyst for a prestigious investment firm in downtown Chicago. I'd worked incredibly hard to get to that position, graduating with honors from Northwestern with a degree in finance, completing internships at top firms, and spending 5 years building my expertise in financial modeling and risk assessment. The position at Crawford and Associates was everything I'd hoped for professionally. The firm managed portfolios worth over $2 billion, worked with high-profile clients, and had a reputation for excellence that opened doors throughout the financial industry. The salary was substantial, the benefits were comprehensive, and the potential for advancement was significant for someone with my background and ambitions. I'd been recruited specifically by Michael Crawford, the firm's founding partner and managing director. Michael was 45 years old, married with 2 teenage children, and widely respected in the Chicago financial community. He had an MBA from Wharton, over 20 years of experience in investment management, and a track record of building successful portfolios for wealthy individuals and institutional clients. During my interview process, Michael had been professional, impressive, and encouraging about my potential contributions to the firm. He spoke passionately about the company's culture of excellence, the opportunities for professional development, and his commitment to building a team of the most talented analysts in the city. He seemed like exactly the kind of mentor I'd hoped to find, successful, knowledgeable, and invested in helping younger professionals advance their careers. My first 6 months at the firm were everything I'd expected and more. I was working on complex financial models, conducting research for high-stakes investment decisions, and learning from colleagues who were among the best in their fields. Michael was an engaged and supportive supervisor who provided detailed feedback on my work, included me in important client meetings, and gave me increasingly challenging assignments that showcased my analytical abilities. The work environment was demanding but rewarding. I was typically in the office by 7 in the morning and rarely left before 7 in the evening, but I was passionate about the work and excited about the learning opportunities. My colleagues were smart, driven professionals who challenged me to improve my skills and expand my knowledge of financial markets and investment strategies. Michael seemed particularly invested in my professional development. He would schedule regular one-on-one meetings to discuss my progress, provide guidance on complex projects, and share insights about the industry that weren't available in textbooks or formal training programs. He introduced me to important clients, included me in strategic planning sessions, and began assigning me responsibilities that were typically reserved for more senior analysts. I was grateful for his mentorship and impressed by his willingness to invest time and energy in developing my career. Michael was clearly successful and respected, and having his support felt like a tremendous advantage in building my own reputation within the firm and the broader financial community. I worked hard to justify his confidence in my abilities and prove that his investment in my development was worthwhile. The shift in our relationship began so gradually that I didn't recognize it at first. Looking back now, I can see that Michael's approach was methodical and calculated, designed to blur professional boundaries slowly enough that I wouldn't recognize the manipulation until I was already trapped in his web of control and dependency. Michael started scheduling our meetings later in the day, often after most other employees had left the office. Initially, this seemed like a practical response to his busy schedule and a sign that he was willing to invest extra time in my professional development. The quiet office environment made our conversations feel more intimate and important, like I was receiving special access to insights and guidance that weren't available to other junior employees. He began sharing more personal information about his life, his family, and his career journey, encouraging me to do the same. What felt like growing trust and professional intimacy gradually became something more personal and uncomfortable. Michael would talk about his college years, his early career struggles, his relationship with his wife, and his concerns about his teenage children. He positioned this sharing as evidence of his trust in me and his view of our relationship as something special and unique. The personal revelations were often accompanied by subtle criticisms of his wife and family that seemed designed to generate sympathy for his domestic situation. He would describe his wife as someone who didn't understand the demands of his career, who took his financial success for granted, and who had become distant and unappreciative over the years of their marriage. He painted a picture of himself as a successful man who was lonely and unappreciated at home, someone who deserved understanding and support that he wasn't receiving from his family. Michael also began asking increasingly personal questions about my own life, relationships, and goals. He wanted to know about my dating history, my family relationships, my financial situation, and my long-term career aspirations. He positioned these questions as evidence of his interest in my overall well-being and his commitment to providing comprehensive mentorship that addressed both professional and personal development. The boundaries between professional and personal conversations became increasingly blurred during these late evening meetings. Michael would order dinner to be delivered to the office, pour wine from bottles he kept in his private bar, and create an atmosphere that felt more like social interaction than business discussion. He would dim the lights, play quiet music, and encourage me to relax and speak freely about topics that had nothing to do with financial analysis or investment strategy. Michael started making comments about my appearance that went beyond normal professional feedback. He would tell me I looked particularly professional or attractive on certain days, compliment my choice of clothing, or suggest that my presence added something special to client meetings. Initially, I interpreted these comments as innocent observations or awkward attempts at encouragement from someone who wasn't naturally comfortable with interpersonal communication. But the comments became more frequent and more personal over time. Michael would notice when I changed my hairstyle, compliment me on my perfume, or suggest that certain colors looked especially good on me. He would make observations about my figure, my posture, and my general attractiveness that had nothing to do with professional appearance or client relations. When I seemed uncomfortable with these comments, he would laugh them off as harmless observations or claim that I was being overly sensitive about normal workplace feedback. He also began creating situations where physical contact was more likely or more intimate. Michael would find reasons to stand close to me while reviewing documents, to touch my shoulder or back while providing guidance, or to embrace me in ways that lasted longer and felt more personal than normal professional interactions. He would position these touches as natural expressions of mentorship and support, but they increasingly felt invasive and inappropriate. The business travel requests became more frequent and more suspicious. Michael began suggesting that I accompany him to conferences, client meetings, and industry events that didn't seem to require my specific expertise or input. He would explain these invitations as valuable networking opportunities and chances to observe high-level business negotiations, but the destinations and itineraries often seemed designed more for personal interaction than professional development. During these trips, Michael's behavior became increasingly inappropriate and testing. He would suggest sharing hotel rooms to save on expenses, recommend restaurants that were romantic rather than business-oriented, and create itineraries that included significant amounts of leisure time together. He would make comments about the beautiful locations, the intimate atmosphere of certain venues, and the special nature of our professional relationship that allowed for such exclusive opportunities. Michael also began isolating me from other colleagues and potential sources of support within the firm. He would schedule private meetings that conflicted with team gatherings, assign me to projects that required working independently rather than collaboratively, and discourage me from building close relationships with other employees. He positioned this isolation as evidence of my special status and his confidence in my abilities, but it effectively cut me off from people who might have recognized his inappropriate behavior or provided support if I'd tried to resist his advances. The psychological grooming was sophisticated and systematic. Michael consistently reinforced the message that I was special, talented, and deserving of opportunities that weren't available to other junior employees. He would praise my analytical abilities, my professional potential, and my personal qualities in ways that made me feel grateful for his attention and invested in maintaining his approval. At the same time, he gradually undermined my confidence in my ability to succeed without his support and guidance. He would make subtle comments about the competitive nature of the financial industry, the difficulty of building a successful career without strong mentorship, and the importance of having advocates in senior positions who are willing to invest personally in your development. Michael was careful to frame his increasing demands and expectations as normal aspects of professional mentorship rather than inappropriate advances. He would talk about the importance of loyalty between colleagues, the value of exclusive professional relationships, and the advantages that came from being willing to go above and beyond in building connections with senior leadership. The progression from professional mentorship to sexual proposition was so gradual that I found myself accepting behaviors and situations that I would have immediately rejected if they'd been presented without the months of psychological preparation. Michael had spent almost a year building my dependence on his approval, isolating me from other sources of support, and positioning himself as essential to my career development before making his intentions explicitly clear. He also began finding reasons to extend our time together beyond normal business hours. He would suggest dinner meetings to discuss important projects, weekend work sessions to prepare for Monday client presentations, or after-hour strategy sessions that seemed to require my specific input. Again, I initially viewed these requests as signs of his confidence in my abilities and his commitment to including me in important business activities. The personal questions became more frequent and more intrusive. Michael would ask about my dating life, my relationship history, and my personal goals and dreams outside of work. He shared details about his marriage that seemed inappropriate for a professional relationship, describing his wife as distant and unappreciative of his professional success and long working hours. He began positioning himself as someone who understood and appreciated my ambitions in ways that other people in my life didn't. He would say that my family and friends probably didn't fully grasp the demands of building a career in finance, that they couldn't appreciate the sacrifices required for professional success, and that he was perhaps the only person who truly understood my drive and potential. Michael started creating situations where we would be alone together more frequently. He would schedule meetings in his private office after hours, suggest business trips that required only the two of us to attend, or find reasons to work late on projects that somehow required my assistance. He would position these situations as normal business activities, but they increasingly felt designed to isolate me from other colleagues and create opportunities for more personal interactions. About 8 months into my employment, Michael's behavior crossed a line that I couldn't ignore or rationalize away. During one of our late evening meetings, he made explicitly sexual comments about my appearance and began suggesting that our professional relationship could benefit from a more personal dimension. He didn't threaten me directly, but he made it clear that my career advancement at the firm would depend on my willingness to engage with him beyond normal professional boundaries. The proposition was delivered with the same confidence and authority that he used in business meetings. Michael explained that successful careers in finance often depended on building special relationships with mentors and supervisors, that the most successful women in the industry understood the importance of personal loyalty and discretion, and that my potential for advancement would be significantly enhanced if I was willing to demonstrate my commitment to our partnership in more intimate ways. He was careful to frame his expectations as normal aspects of professional development rather than sexual coercion. He talked about the importance of trust between colleagues, the value of exclusive mentoring relationships, and the advantages that would come from having his special support and advocacy within the firm. But his meaning was unmistakable. My professional future was being tied to my willingness to have a sexual relationship with him. When I expressed discomfort with his suggestions, Michael's demeanor changed dramatically. The supportive mentor disappeared, replaced by someone who was cold, calculating, and threatening. He reminded me that he was the managing partner of the firm, that my employment and professional reputation were entirely dependent on his satisfaction with my performance, and that he had the power to destroy my career in the financial industry if I proved to be ungrateful or disloyal. Michael explained that he'd taken significant risks by hiring me and investing in my development, that other firms would be hesitant to hire someone who had been unsuccessful at Crawford & Associates, and that references from previous employers would be crucial for any future opportunities in finance. He made it clear that refusing his advances wouldn't just mean losing my current job. It would mean the end of my career in the industry I'd worked so hard to enter. The threats were delivered calmly and matter-of-factly, as if he was explaining normal business procedures rather than describing how he planned to blackmail me into a sexual relationship. Michael had clearly thought through the power dynamics and understood exactly how vulnerable my position was. As a young professional without significant industry connections or financial resources, I was entirely dependent on his goodwill for my career prospects. He also made it clear that any attempt to report his behavior would be futile and self-destructive. He reminded me that he was a respected partner in the firm with over 20 years of industry experience, while I was a junior employee with less than a year at the company. He suggested that HR would be unlikely to believe accusations against him, particularly when they came from someone whose performance had been consistently praised and who had no evidence of inappropriate behavior. Michael pointed out that filing complaints against supervisors was a career-ending move for junior employees, that other firms would view me as a potential liability and troublemaker, and that the financial industry was small enough that rumors about difficult employees traveled quickly between companies. He positioned reporting him as a choice between accepting his terms or destroying my own future in finance. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and terrifying. Michael had spent months building my trust, demonstrating his power within the firm, and positioning himself as essential to my career development. He'd created a situation where refusing his demands would mean losing everything I'd worked for, while accepting them would compromise my integrity and self-respect in ways that felt unbearable. I spent days agonizing over my limited options, trying to find some way to escape the trap Michael had created without destroying my career or my financial stability. I considered reporting his behavior to HR, but I knew he was right about the power dynamics and the likely outcome of such a complaint. I thought about leaving the firm, but I couldn't afford to be unemployed, and I knew that explaining my departure would be difficult without references from Michael. The isolation was profound and disorienting. I couldn't discuss the situation with colleagues because I didn't know who could be trusted and who might report back to Michael. I couldn't talk to friends or family because I was ashamed and afraid that they would judge me for the choices I was being forced to consider. I couldn't seek advice from mentors in my professional network because admitting what was happening might damage my reputation regardless of how I handled the immediate situation. Eventually, the pressure became too overwhelming to resist. Michael made it clear that he was losing patience with my hesitation, that my future at the firm was becoming uncertain due to my apparent lack of commitment to building our professional relationship, and that other candidates might be more appreciative of the opportunities he was offering. The implied threat was obvious: comply or face the consequences he described. I made the decision that felt like the only way to preserve my career and financial stability. I agreed to Michael's terms, telling myself that I could manage the situation professionally, maintain appropriate boundaries despite the inappropriate relationship, and eventually find a way to transition to another position without damaging my prospects in the industry. That decision marked the beginning of 18 months of psychological torture that affected every aspect of my life. The secret relationship with Michael wasn't just about occasional physical encounters. It was about constant manipulation, control, and the daily stress of maintaining a facade while carrying guilt and shame that felt overwhelming. Every day became an exercise in psychological compartmentalization that was exhausting and damaging to my sense of self and professional identity. Michael was careful to maintain the pretense of a normal, professional relationship during business hours. He continued to provide challenging assignments, positive feedback, and opportunities for advancement that justified his special interest in my career development. To outside observers, I was simply a talented junior analyst who was excelling under the mentorship of a respected partner. The public persona he maintained was masterfully constructed. During staff meetings, he would praise my work and contributions in ways that seemed entirely professional and appropriate. He would assign me high-profile projects that showcased my abilities and demonstrated his confidence in my potential. He would include me in client presentations and strategic discussions that elevated my profile within the firm and the broader industry. But the private reality was entirely different. Michael expected constant availability for personal meetings, weekend encounters, and business trips that served no legitimate business purpose. He demanded absolute discretion about our relationship, while making it clear that my continued employment depended on my compliance with his expectations and my ability to maintain normal professional interactions during business hours. The dual existence was psychologically devastating. I had to smile and express gratitude for Michael's mentorship during team meetings, while knowing that the attention was based on sexual coercion rather than professional merit. I had to participate in office, social events with his wife present, maintaining friendly conversations while carrying the secret of my unwilling involvement with her husband. I had to accept congratulations from colleagues about my rapid advancement while knowing that my success was tied to my compliance with sexual demands rather than my analytical abilities. The constant vigilance required to maintain this facade was exhausting. I had to monitor every expression, every response, every interaction to ensure that I didn't reveal the true nature of my relationship with Michael. I became hyper-aware of how others perceived our professional dynamic, constantly worried that someone would notice something inappropriate or become suspicious about the special attention I was receiving. Michael's expectations extended far beyond the office and normal business hours. He would text me late at night with demands for immediate responses, call me on weekends with requests for personal meetings, and expect me to be available for his convenience, regardless of my own plans or commitments. He positioned these demands as normal aspects of working for a high-level executive, but they were clearly designed to maintain his control over my personal time and freedom. The business trips became particularly difficult to endure. Michael would book accommodations that required us to share suites or adjoining rooms, create itineraries that included romantic dinners and intimate settings, and expect me to participate in activities that had nothing to do with business, but everything to do with maintaining our coercive arrangement. I had to pretend to be grateful for these opportunities while feeling violated and trapped by the circumstances. The psychological manipulation was constant and sophisticated. Michael would alternate between expressing affection and making threats, between praising my performance and criticizing my attitude, between offering advancement opportunities and reminding me of my vulnerability. He kept me constantly off balance, never sure what version of him I would encounter or what his mood would demand from our interactions. He became expert at using my own ambitions and insecurities against me. When I seemed resistant to his demands, he would question my commitment to my career, suggest that I was ungrateful for the opportunities he was providing, or remind me of how competitive the financial industry was for young women without strong advocates. When I seemed too compliant, he would increase his demands and expectations, testing the limits of what I would accept to maintain my position. The isolation from friends and family became increasingly profound as the coercive relationship continued. I couldn't maintain normal social relationships because I was constantly preoccupied with managing Michael's demands and expectations. I couldn't pursue romantic relationships because I was already trapped in an unwanted sexual arrangement that made genuine intimacy feel impossible. I couldn't share my struggles with friends or family because I was ashamed of the situation and afraid they would judge me for the choices I was being forced to make. The impact on my physical health was significant and alarming. The constant stress began manifesting in chronic headaches, digestive problems, and insomnia that affected my ability to perform at work and maintain any semblance of normal life outside the office. I started experiencing panic attacks during situations that reminded me of my powerlessness, particularly when I was alone with Michael or when he made unexpected demands for my time and attention. My eating habits became erratic as I lost my appetite during periods of high stress and anxiety. I found myself either unable to eat for hours at a time or compulsively overeating when the emotional pressure became overwhelming. The weight fluctuations were noticeable enough that colleagues began commenting on my appearance, adding another layer of stress and self-consciousness to an already unbearable situation. The professional costs were subtle but significant. While I continued to receive challenging assignments and positive feedback, I was constantly aware that my success was tied to maintaining an inappropriate relationship rather than demonstrating genuine competence. I began to doubt my own abilities and question whether I deserved the recognition I was receiving. The imposter syndrome was crippling, making it difficult to feel confident in my analytical skills or comfortable with the praise I received from clients and colleagues. The constant stress and distraction also affected the quality of my work in ways that were sometimes noticeable. I would find myself unable to concentrate on complex financial models, making errors that I would normally catch, or struggling to maintain the attention to detail that had originally distinguished my performance. Michael would use these lapses as evidence that I needed his continued guidance and support, reinforcing my dependence on his approval, while simultaneously undermining my confidence in my professional abilities. The financial dependence became more pronounced over time as my lifestyle adjusted to the substantial salary I was earning at Crawford and Associates. I had taken on higher rent, increased student loan payments, and other financial obligations that would be difficult to maintain if I had to start over at a lower salary elsewhere. Michael was well aware of this financial vulnerability and would occasionally reference it when I seemed resistant to his demands, reminding me of the lifestyle and financial security that I would lose if I proved to be ungrateful or disloyal. The threats became more explicit and more frightening as Michael grew more confident in his control over my situation. He would describe in detail how he could destroy my reputation in the financial industry, prevent me from obtaining references that would allow me to find comparable employment, and ensure that other firms learned about my alleged unreliability and lack of professional judgment. These threats were often delivered casually, woven into normal business conversations in ways that maintained his plausible deniability while keeping me constantly aware of my vulnerability. Michael also began involving me in deceptions directed at his family and colleagues that added another layer of guilt and complicity to the already unbearable situation. He would ask me to provide alibis for his absences from family events, to participate in company social functions where I had to interact normally with his wife and children, and to maintain professional relationships with colleagues who had no idea about the coercive arrangement he was maintaining with his employee. The complicity in these deceptions was particularly devastating because it made me feel like an active participant in betraying innocent people rather than simply a victim of Michael's manipulation. His wife was kind and welcoming during company events, often asking about my career and expressing pride in my accomplishments. His children would occasionally visit the office and interact with me in ways that were friendly and trusting. Knowing that I was involved in deceiving these people, while they treated me with respect and affection, added layers of shame and self-disgust to an already overwhelming emotional burden. The psychological impact of living this double life was devastating. I had to smile and act grateful for Michael's mentorship during staff meetings, while knowing that the attention was based on sexual coercion rather than professional merit. I had to maintain friendly relationships with his wife during company social events, while carrying the secret of my forced involvement with her husband. I had to accept praise for my professional development while knowing that my advancement was tied to my willingness to submit to blackmail. The guilt and shame were constant and overwhelming. I felt responsible for the situation, despite knowing intellectually that I'd been coerced and threatened. I questioned every decision I'd made, wondered if I could have handled things differently, and struggled with feelings of self-disgust that made it difficult to maintain relationships with friends and family who didn't know what I was experiencing. The isolation grew more profound over time. I couldn't maintain normal social relationships because I was constantly worried about revealing details that might expose the secret I was carrying. I couldn't pursue romantic relationships because I was already trapped in an unwanted sexual arrangement that made genuine intimacy feel impossible. I couldn't focus on hobbies or interests outside of work because the stress and anxiety consumed most of my emotional energy. My physical health began to deteriorate under the constant stress. I developed chronic insomnia, frequent headaches, and digestive problems that doctors couldn't explain through normal medical examinations. I started experiencing panic attacks during situations that reminded me of my powerlessness, particularly in professional settings where older men held authority over younger women. The professional costs were significant despite the apparent advantages of Michael's mentorship. While I received challenging assignments and opportunities for advancement, I was constantly aware that my success was tied to maintaining an inappropriate relationship rather than demonstrating genuine competence. I began to doubt my own abilities and question whether I deserved the recognition I was receiving. The financial dependence made leaving feel impossible. My salary at Crawford and Associates was substantial enough that I'd adjusted my lifestyle to match my income, taking on higher rent, student loan payments, and other financial obligations that would be difficult to maintain if I had to start over at a lower salary elsewhere. Michael had also made it clear that he would provide negative references that could prevent me from finding comparable positions at other firms. The threats became more explicit over time as Michael grew more confident in his control over my situation. He would remind me regularly about his power to destroy my career, his connections throughout the financial industry, and his ability to ensure that I would never work in finance again if I proved to be disloyal or ungrateful. These reminders were often delivered casually, woven into normal business conversations in ways that maintained his plausible deniability while keeping me aware of my vulnerability. Michael also began expanding his demands and expectations. What had started as occasional private meetings evolved into regular weekend encounters. Business trips that served no purpose other than providing opportunities for sexual access, and social events where I was expected to play the role of his grateful protege while managing my discomfort and revulsion. He started involving me in deceptions directed at his wife and family. He would ask me to provide alibis for his absences, to participate in company events where his behavior toward me might be scrutinized, and to maintain friendly relationships with his family members who had no idea about the coercive relationship he was maintaining with his employee. The complicity in these deceptions added another layer of guilt and shame to an already unbearable situation. I felt like I was betraying his wife, who was kind and welcoming during company social events, by participating in her husband's manipulation and lies. I felt like I was enabling his predatory behavior by maintaining the professional facade that allowed him to continue abusing his position of authority. The impact on my professional identity was particularly devastating. I'd entered finance because I was passionate about analytical work, financial modeling, and investment strategy. But the constant stress and ethical compromises made it impossible to find satisfaction in work that had once been engaging and meaningful. Every success felt tainted by the knowledge that my advancement was based on sexual coercion rather than professional merit. I began to lose confidence in my analytical abilities and judgment. If I was capable of being manipulated and controlled so completely in my professional life, how could I trust my assessment of financial markets and investment opportunities? The self-doubt extended to every aspect of my work, making it difficult to perform at the level that had originally attracted Michael's attention. The turning point came during a company retreat in Colorado, about 16 months into the coercive relationship. Michael had arranged for us to share accommodations under the pretense of budget constraints, and his behavior during the trip was more aggressive and demanding than ever before. He seemed to view the retreat as an opportunity to solidify his control over me and test my willingness to maintain our arrangement under increasingly difficult circumstances. During one particularly degrading encounter, I realized that the situation would only continue to escalate unless I found the courage to escape. Michael's demands were becoming more frequent and more invasive. His threats were becoming more explicit, and his confidence in his control over me was growing in ways that suggested he would never voluntarily release me from the arrangement he'd created. I also realized that I was becoming complicit in creating a template that he could use to exploit other young women in the future. By maintaining the relationship and the professional facade, I was enabling him to perfect his methods of coercion and demonstrating that his approach was effective in controlling vulnerable employees. The process of planning my escape was complicated and terrifying. I knew that simply quitting wouldn't protect me from Michael's threats to destroy my reputation and career prospects. I needed to find a way to document his behavior, protect myself legally, and secure alternative employment that wouldn't be subject to his influence and retaliation. I started researching employment lawyers who specialized in workplace harassment and sexual coercion. The consultations I had were sobering but educational. While the lawyers confirmed that Michael's behavior was clearly illegal, they also explained the challenges of proving coercion and workplace sexual harassment, particularly when the victim had appeared to participate willingly in the relationship for an extended period. The attorneys advised me to begin documenting every inappropriate interaction, to avoid being alone with Michael whenever possible, and to start building a case that would demonstrate the coercive nature of our relationship. They also recommended that I begin exploring employment opportunities outside of Chicago, where Michael's influence and connections would be less significant. I started keeping detailed records of every private meeting, inappropriate comment, and coercive demand. I saved text messages and emails that demonstrated the personal nature of our interactions and Michael's expectations for discretion and compliance. I began recording conversations when possible, hoping to capture evidence of his threats and manipulation. The documentation process was emotionally exhausting because it required me to relive and analyze traumatic interactions while maintaining the pretense of normal professional relationships during business hours. But it also gave me a sense of agency and control that I'd been lacking since the coercion began. I also started reaching out to professional contacts outside of Chicago, exploring opportunities in other cities where Michael's influence would be minimal. The job search was challenging because I couldn't use Michael as a reference without exposing myself to retaliation, and explaining my interest in leaving such a prestigious position without mentioning the coercion was difficult. Several months into my documentation and job search efforts, an opportunity arose that seemed like the perfect escape route. A former colleague who had left Crawford and Associates for a position in Seattle reached out about a senior analyst opening at her new firm. The position offered comparable responsibilities and compensation, and the firm was growing rapidly enough that they were willing to hire quickly without extensive reference checks. The decision to accept the Seattle position and leave Chicago was terrifying because it meant abandoning the professional network I'd built and starting over in an unfamiliar city. But it also represented freedom from Michael's control and the opportunity to rebuild my career based on genuine merit rather than sexual coercion. Michael's reaction to my resignation was a combination of rage, threats, and desperate attempts to maintain control. He initially refused to accept my decision, claiming that leaving would be a career-ending mistake that would prove my lack of loyalty and professional judgment. He reminded me of his power to influence my reputation throughout the financial industry and suggested that he would ensure that other firms learned about my unreliability and ingratitude. When it became clear that I was determined to leave despite his threats, Michael's approach shifted to manipulation and false promises. He offered substantial salary increases, equity partnerships, and other financial incentives if I would reconsider my decision. He claimed that our relationship could be modified to be less demanding while still maintaining the special mentorship that had advanced my career so quickly. But I had already made my decision and secured alternative employment that would allow me to escape his control. The knowledge that I had options and legal documentation of his behavior gave me strength to resist his final attempts at manipulation and coercion. My last day at Crawford and Associates was surreal and emotionally complex. I was relieved to be escaping Michael's control, but I was also angry about the 18 months of my life that had been stolen by his manipulation and threats. I was excited about the new opportunities in Seattle, but I was also grieving the career I'd originally envisioned and the professional identity that had been compromised by the coercive relationship. The transition to Seattle and my new position was both liberating and challenging. I was finally working in an environment where my advancement was based on professional competence rather than sexual compliance, but I was also dealing with the psychological aftermath of prolonged trauma and manipulation. The freedom to build genuine professional relationships and pursue career goals based on merit was wonderful, but it was also accompanied by anxiety, trust issues, and ongoing concerns about Michael's potential for retaliation. The new firm was everything I'd hoped for professionally. My colleagues were respectful and supportive. My supervisor provided mentorship that was appropriate and professional, and my work was evaluated based on objective criteria rather than personal relationships. The contrast with my experience at Crawford and Associates was stark and healing, but the psychological recovery was slow and difficult. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, worried that Michael would somehow track down my new employer and sabotage my fresh start. I struggled with trust issues that affected my relationships with male colleagues and supervisors. I questioned my own judgment and professional abilities, wondering if my success was genuine or simply the result of other people's inappropriate interest in me. The guilt and shame persisted long after I'd escaped the coercive relationship. I felt responsible for not reporting Michael's behavior sooner, potentially allowing him to victimize other women after my departure. I questioned every decision I'd made during the 18 months of coercion, wondering if I could have found alternatives that would have protected both my career and my integrity. The isolation was particularly difficult to overcome. I had spent so long maintaining secrets and managing a double life that normal social interactions felt challenging and uncomfortable. I struggled to form genuine friendships and romantic relationships because I was afraid of being judged if people learned about my past experiences with workplace coercion. Professional therapy was essential for processing the trauma and developing strategies for moving forward. My therapist helped me understand that I'd been the victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation and workplace abuse, that my choices had been constrained by legitimate threats and financial vulnerabilities, and that the responsibility for the coercive relationship belonged entirely to Michael rather than to me. The legal consultation process continued even after I'd left Chicago. While I ultimately decided not to pursue formal charges against Michael, the attorneys I worked with helped me understand my rights and options. They also provided documentation that could be used to protect me if Michael attempted to retaliate against me professionally. The decision not to press charges was difficult and remains controversial in my own mind. While I had significant documentation of Michael's coercive behavior, the attorneys explained that proving workplace sexual coercion in court was extremely challenging, particularly when the victim had appeared to participate willingly for an extended period. The legal process would have been expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally devastating, with no guarantee of a successful outcome. I also knew that pursuing formal charges would have required me to relive the trauma repeatedly during depositions and trial proceedings. The publicity and professional scrutiny that would have accompanied a high-profile harassment case could have damaged my career prospects regardless of the legal outcome. Most importantly, I wanted to focus my energy on rebuilding my life and career rather than on prolonged legal battles with Michael. The escape to Seattle had given me freedom and safety, and I was determined to use those advantages to create the professional future I'd originally envisioned rather than remaining tied to Michael through adversarial legal proceedings. The professional recovery has been gradual but significant. Over the past year, I've been promoted twice at my new firm, receiving advancement that's based entirely on my analytical abilities and leadership potential. The recognition feels genuine and earned in ways that the praise at Crawford and Associates never did. Each promotion has been accompanied by clear explanations of the criteria used for evaluation, transparent feedback about my performance, and opportunities to contribute to decisions about my own professional development. The contrast with my experience under Michael's manipulation is stark and healing. My current supervisor provides mentorship that is appropriate, professional, and focused entirely on developing my skills and advancing my career based on merit. The guidance I receive is delivered in group settings or during normal business hours, with clear objectives and measurable outcomes that relate directly to my professional responsibilities. Working in an environment where advancement is based on competence rather than compliance has been transformative for my confidence and job satisfaction. I've been able to rebuild my professional identity around my analytical abilities, my strategic thinking, and my leadership potential rather than my willingness to submit to coercion. The imposter syndrome that plagued me during my time at Crawford and Associates has gradually diminished as I've received recognition that I know is based on genuine merit. I've also become involved in mentoring programs for young women entering the financial industry. Sharing my experiences and providing support to others facing similar challenges has been healing and empowering. While I don't share the specific details of my coercive relationship with Michael, I do provide guidance about recognizing inappropriate workplace behavior and understanding the options available to women facing professional manipulation. The mentoring work has shown me how widespread these problems are within the financial industry and other male-dominated professional environments. Many of the young women I work with have encountered supervisors who blur professional boundaries, make inappropriate comments about their appearance, or suggest that advancement requires building special personal relationships with senior executives. The patterns are remarkably consistent across different firms and different cities, suggesting that Michael's behavior wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a broader cultural problem within the industry. Through these conversations, I've learned about the various forms that workplace coercion can take. Some women face explicit quid pro quo arrangements, like the one Michael imposed on me, where advancement is directly tied to sexual compliance. Others experience more subtle forms of harassment that create hostile work environments, undermine their confidence, or limit their opportunities without making explicit demands for sexual contact. The common threads in these experiences include the exploitation of power differentials, the isolation of victims from potential sources of support, the use of financial dependence as leverage for compliance, and the systematic undermining of women's confidence in their professional abilities. The perpetrators are often senior executives with significant influence over hiring, promotion, and reference decisions, making resistance feel impossible and reporting feel futile. I've also learned about the long-term impacts of workplace sexual coercion on women's careers and personal lives. Many of the women I've spoken with describe ongoing struggles with trust, intimacy, and professional confidence that persist long after they've escaped the immediate coercive situations. The psychological damage can affect relationships with colleagues, supervisors, romantic partners, and family members in ways that compound the original trauma. The financial costs of resistance are often substantial and long-lasting. Women who report harassment or leave toxic environments frequently experience career setbacks, income reductions, and difficulty finding comparable employment that can affect their financial security for years. The economic vulnerability that enables coercion in the first place often continues after the immediate situation is resolved, making recovery more difficult and prolonged. Understanding these broader patterns has helped me recognize that my experience with Michael was part of a systemic problem rather than an isolated incident or personal failure. The shame and self-blame that characterized much of my recovery process have been replaced by anger at the systems that enable this behavior and determination to contribute to changing those systems. The therapeutic work has been essential for processing the trauma and developing healthy coping strategies. My therapist helped me understand the psychological dynamics of coercive relationships, the ways that perpetrators use manipulation and control to maintain compliance, and the reasons why intelligent, capable women can become trapped in situations that seem obviously exploitative to outside observers. The therapy also addressed the complex feelings of responsibility and complicity that many victims of workplace coercion experience. I struggled for months with questions about why I hadn't resisted more effectively, why I hadn't reported Michael's behavior sooner, and whether I was somehow responsible for enabling his abuse of other women. My therapist helped me understand that these feelings of responsibility were part of the psychological manipulation rather than accurate assessments of my actual culpability. Learning about trauma responses and survival mechanisms was particularly helpful for understanding my own behavior during the coercive relationship. The compliance, the secrecy, and the attempts to maintain normal professional relationships weren't signs of weakness or complicity. They were adaptive responses to a threatening situation where resistance could have resulted in significant harm to my career and financial security. The legal consultation process was educational, even though I ultimately decided not to pursue formal charges against Michael. The attorneys I worked with helped me understand the challenges of proving workplace sexual coercion, the types of evidence that would be most compelling in such cases, and the potential outcomes of different legal strategies. The attorneys explained the potential for retaliation against employees who file harassment complaints, the ways that powerful perpetrators can use their influence to discredit accusers, and the limited protections available to victims who choose to pursue legal remedies. This information helped me make an informed decision about whether to pursue formal charges, though it also highlighted the inadequacy of current legal protections for victims of workplace abuse. The decision not to press charges was difficult and remains complex in my own mind. While I had significant documentation of Michael's coercive behavior and could have potentially built a strong case, I chose to focus my energy on rebuilding my life and career rather than on prolonged legal proceedings that would have required me to relive the trauma repeatedly. I also considered the impact that a high-profile harassment case might have on my ability to rebuild my career in the financial industry. While retaliation against harassment victims is illegal, the practical reality is that being involved in such cases can make employers hesitant to hire or promote individuals who might be perceived as potential legal liabilities. The focus on recovery and rebuilding has been the right choice for me personally, but I recognize that it may have allowed Michael to continue his predatory behavior with other women. This knowledge is difficult to live with, but I've come to understand that victims of abuse aren't responsible for stopping their abusers. That responsibility belongs to employers, legal systems, and society as a whole. The experience has fundamentally changed my understanding of workplace dynamics and professional relationships. I'm now much more aware of power differentials, boundary violations, and the subtle ways that inappropriate behavior can escalate over time. I've developed better instincts for recognizing manipulation and coercion, and I'm more confident in my ability to resist such behavior if I encounter it in the future. The networking and relationship building that I do now is strategic and purposeful rather than dependent on any individual's approval or support. I maintain connections with multiple colleagues, participate in professional organizations, and develop expertise that makes me valuable to multiple employers. This reduces my vulnerability to manipulation and gives me options if I encounter inappropriate behavior in future positions. The experience has also made me more committed to supporting other women who face similar challenges. I speak openly about workplace harassment and coercion when appropriate. I mentor younger colleagues about recognizing and responding to inappropriate behavior, and I advocate for policies and practices that create more equitable and respectful work environments. I've learned that silence and secrecy enable predatory behavior to continue, while open discussion and mutual support can help break cycles of abuse and manipulation. Sharing experiences, strategies, and resources with other women creates networks of support that can provide alternatives to the isolation that makes coercion possible. The financial independence I've worked to rebuild has been crucial for maintaining my ability to make choices based on my values, rather than my vulnerability to economic pressure. I've built emergency savings that would allow me to leave a toxic situation if necessary. The personal recovery has been more challenging, but equally important. I've slowly rebuilt my ability to trust my own judgment and professional instincts. I've learned to recognize warning signs of manipulative behavior and to establish boundaries that protect me from future exploitation. I've developed relationships with colleagues and friends who respect my professional abilities and personal boundaries. The romantic recovery has been the most difficult aspect of rebuilding my life. The coercive relationship with Michael damaged my ability to trust intimate partners and my confidence in my own desirability outside of exploitative contexts. Dating and forming genuine romantic connections has required patience, therapy, and gradual rebuilding of my self-worth and trust in others. Looking back now, I can see that Michael's manipulation was sophisticated and systematic in ways that made resistance extremely difficult. He specifically targeted me during a vulnerable period in my career when I was dependent on his support and recommendations. He gradually escalated his demands while simultaneously increasing my professional and financial dependence on him. He isolated me from potential sources of support and made the costs of resistance seem overwhelming. The experience taught me important lessons about power dynamics in professional settings and the vulnerability of junior employees to exploitation by supervisors with authority over their careers. I learned that workplace abuse often involves sophisticated psychological manipulation rather than obvious coercion, that financial dependence can be used as a weapon against vulnerable employees, and that the legal and HR systems designed to protect workers are often inadequate when dealing with powerful predators. I also learned about my own strength and resilience. Despite the trauma and manipulation, I was ultimately able to recognize the unsustainability of the situation, plan an escape strategy, and rebuild my career based on genuine merit. The experience was devastating, but it also demonstrated my ability to survive and overcome circumstances that initially seemed hopeless. The broader implications of my experience extend beyond my individual situation. Workplace sexual coercion remains a widespread problem that affects countless women across industries and professional levels. The power dynamics that enabled Michael's manipulation exist in many organizations, and the legal and cultural protections available to victims remain inadequate. The financial industry, in particular, has cultural characteristics that can enable predatory behavior. The emphasis on personal relationships and mentorship, the significant power differentials between junior and senior employees, the importance of references and recommendations for career advancement, and the relatively small professional networks all create conditions where exploitation can flourish. My advice to women facing similar situations is complex because the choices are genuinely difficult and the stakes are genuinely high. The ideal response, immediate reporting and resistance, may not always be practical or safe for women who lack financial resources, professional alternatives, or family support systems. Document everything you can, even if you're not sure you'll ever use the evidence. Keep detailed records of inappropriate comments, meetings, and demands. Save text messages, emails, and other communications that demonstrate the personal nature of interactions with supervisors. This documentation can be crucial if you decide to report the behavior or if you need legal protection against retaliation. Build professional networks and relationships outside your immediate workplace. Maintain connections with former colleagues. Participate in industry organizations and develop expertise that makes you valuable to multiple employers. This reduces your dependence on any single supervisor or organization and gives you options if you need to escape a toxic situation. Seek legal advice early, even if you're not ready to pursue formal action. Understanding your rights and options can help you make informed decisions about how to protect yourself. Many employment attorneys offer initial consultations at no cost, and some specialize in workplace harassment cases that involve financial coercion. Trust your instincts about inappropriate behavior, even if you can't immediately articulate why something feels wrong. Predators often test boundaries gradually, and early intervention is more effective than waiting until the situation becomes overtly abusive. Don't dismiss your discomfort or convince yourself that you're overreacting to normal workplace dynamics. Consider therapy or counseling, both during and after traumatic workplace experiences. Professional support can help you process complex emotions, develop coping strategies, and maintain perspective during difficult situations. The psychological impact of workplace abuse extends far beyond the immediate professional context and can affect every aspect of your life. To the men in positions of authority who might be watching this, understand that you have tremendous power over the careers and lives of your employees. That power comes with responsibility to maintain appropriate boundaries and treat all employees with respect regardless of their gender, age, or position within the organization. Your comments about women's appearances, your personal questions about their relationships and goals, and your suggestions about the personal elements of professional advancement all contribute to environments where coercion and exploitation can develop. What seems like harmless flirtation or mentorship to you may feel threatening and uncomfortable to employees who depend on your approval for their professional survival. When you hold authority over someone's career, salary, and professional reputation, you also hold enormous power to influence their personal choices and behavior. Using that power to extract sexual or romantic compliance is not just unethical, it's criminal. The fact that someone appears to participate willingly doesn't mean they weren't coerced by the power you hold over their livelihood. For organizations looking to prevent workplace sexual coercion, focus on creating multiple reporting channels, ensuring that investigations are conducted by qualified professionals rather than internal HR departments, and most importantly, establishing real consequences for supervisors who abuse their authority regardless of their value to the organization. The policies and training programs that many companies implement are often inadequate because they don't address the fundamental power imbalances that enable coercion. Effective prevention requires structural changes that reduce the dependence of junior employees on individual supervisors and create genuine alternatives for advancement and professional development. My 18 months in a coercive relationship with Michael Crawford cost me professionally, personally, and psychologically in ways that I'm still recovering from 3 years later. But the experience also taught me about my own strength, the importance of professional independence, and the value of environments where advancement is based on merit rather than manipulation. The secret affair I was pressured into maintaining wasn't really an affair at all. It was workplace abuse disguised as a relationship. The pressure to remain silent wasn't about discretion or professionalism. It was about maintaining a system of exploitation that benefited Michael while devastating my sense of self-worth and professional identity. I share the story not because I want sympathy or pity, but because I know there are other women facing similar situations who feel as trapped and hopeless as I once did. You are not alone. You are not responsible for the behavior of predators who abuse their authority, and you have more options and strength than you might realize. The fear of losing your job is legitimate, but it shouldn't force you to sacrifice your dignity and self-respect indefinitely. The guilt about being forced into silence is understandable, but the responsibility for that silence belongs to the people who created the coercive conditions, not to you for surviving within them. You deserve to build a career based on your talents, your work ethic, and your professional contributions. You deserve supervisors who mentor and support you without expecting sexual compliance in return. You deserve to feel proud of your accomplishments without wondering whether they were earned through merit or manipulation. The secret I was forced to carry nearly destroyed me, but sharing it has been part of my healing and recovery. Breaking the silence around workplace sexual coercion is essential for protecting future generations of women from experiencing the trauma and manipulation that too many of us have endured. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it's difficult to hear about these experiences, but I believe sharing them is crucial for creating awareness and change. If you're facing similar pressures or coercion, please know that you're stronger than you think and that there are people and resources available to help you escape and rebuild. Take care of yourselves, trust your instincts, and remember that no career opportunity is worth sacrificing your integrity, your safety, or your sense of self. Until next time, this is Emma, and I'll see you in the next video.